Greetings, children on the screen. Your friendly neighborhood nerd scum here once again, and today I am joined by...
Taylor.
And today we are celebrating that holiest of holidays of the patron saint of slashy kill, Jason Voorhees. It's Friday the 13th, motherfuckers! Right on, guys, so that's right, Friday the 13th once again, and as always, I was going to do something, and since I've relocated out here with Taylor, I thought this would be a great time for me and her to dive into some of the Friday the 13th franchise, and upon prepping for the video, is when I discovered that I have been horribly derelict in my duties as both a friend and a Friday the 13th fan, as the only film that Taylor and I have watched that features Jason Voorhees is Jason Goes to Hell.
Man, this is some bullshit! Boo this man!
I know. I hear your boos and your shock and your awe and your sadness, but let me say right now, I thoroughly enjoy Jason Goes to Hell. I know a lot of you hate it, but guess what? You can go fuck yourself. The point is that in order to rectify this, both for her, for myself, and for all of you out there, is that we dove into what I feel to be three of the quintessential Friday the 13th films. That being Friday the 13th, The Final Chapter, Friday the 13th, Part 6, Jason Lives, and Friday the 13th, Part 7, The New Blood.
So now we are going to watch all of them, and we're going to see what I think of them, since I haven't seen any of them except for the one.
And I am going to be your life preserver in this sea of uncertainty.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
We're a good team. That's why we work. High five.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But now, Jason's reign of terror is over. Friday the 13th, the final chapter.
Right on, guys, so we're going to go ahead and dive in, starting with Friday the 13th, The Final Chapter. Now, the reason why I picked this is not only because it's one of the better of the franchise, I feel like it really distills what the formula of Friday the 13th is, and kind of takes that to its fullest potential in this movie. Now, Taylor, having never seen a proper Friday the 13th movie, because Jason Goes to Hell is batshit fucking insane, when you would think about the franchise, just from your vague kind of like pop culture osmosis knowledge of it, was this kind of what you were picturing?
Yeah, definitely. It was really fun, and it was like gory enough, you know, and like the kills were really cool too. Yeah, it was exactly what I thought.
How did you feel about like the characters? Because a lot of the things that like these movies are kind of known for is like these generic disposable characters that you don't really care about them, you're just kind of waiting for them to get killed.
I thought that they were like genuine people, you know. Anytime they did something, like there was one time when one of the friends was about to get laid, and when the girl walked out, the guy was like, "Hey," and then there was like, "Stop it," and I was like, that's what a best friend would do. That's something a best friend would do. Especially
with the dynamic of those people. And yeah, again, like one of the reasons why I picked this one is because, and again, like we did watch Part 7 as well, which I feel like the characters in that are much more typical of what people associate with Friday the 13th, and are a lot more similar to some of the characters from the previous installments, where there's not a lot going on there, and they don't necessarily feel like real people, they're just kind of hitting the tropes until their time to die. Whereas I feel like this movie creates a group of people that do feel like people who have lives outside of this movie before it. They feel like they all have like distinct personalities, and while some of them definitely adhere to like some of the archetypes or stereotypes of horror group dynamics, most of them have at least a couple of character beats that put them beyond that. And then when you introduce the family to that equation as well, it's like you have that group of people who are like well-rounded in their own right, but then you introduce this family element to it of just like the wholesome, you know, wholesome, I guess. They're a very wholesome family unit, despite the fact that there's like a divorce lingering. But even with that, there's the mom is a more complex character than what we'd normally get in a lot of these movies. There are just moments where her reaction to what's going on with her kids before bad things start happening, like, tell you a lot about that character's inner life. And it's just like, with all the characters, there's a level of attention paid in this movie that other movies in the franchise don't seem to have. it's a better movie because of that, because it makes it easier to empathize and relate with these characters. And when bad things start happening, even if it's a character that like you wouldn't like that person in real life if you knew them, they still feel real enough that you view them as a real person and not just like meat for the slaughter.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know, maybe Teddy Bear. I know some people really hate Teddy Bear, but you know what? I also think that people hate Teddy Bear because they've known a Teddy Bear, you know? I think that's the thing, is especially if you're in like an extended group of friends, there's going to be that asshole in the group who everyone knows is an asshole, but he's your boy, so there he is, you know? So having said that, yeah, the characters I think are one of the things that really stands out in this film. And overall, I think it's just a very well-made film within this genre. You've already said that you overall enjoyed the movie, and I can confirm that. I was here watching her reaction to it. She's not just saying that so that you don't just railroad us in the comments. What were some of the things about the movie that made you enjoy it, that made you feel like it was a worthwhile experience outside of kind of like the generic slasher that we always hear about?
I love that even though it's supposed to be very serious, there are still funny moments in it. Like, and some of them aren't meant to be funny, but like I was making fun of a lot of the costume choices.
Well, yeah.
That they were my favorite. Like it's like, oh, he's a fuckboy. And like they played the character so well, but also like the dynamic between like the mom and the daughter, and like how the mom's divorce like made them, you know, come together better.
Yeah.
Like that was really cool as well to see.
Yeah, like the mother-daughter dynamic, as you were talking about, and as I was saying, like with the family dynamic, definitely there are scenes just where you see mother and daughter, and it's like, there's not a lot going on in those scenes, but because of that, it actually says a lot about their relationship. And also, when things start going bad, the way that those characters react to it, the way that Tommy interacts with his mother and sister within that, like, while obviously he's the kid, there are a lot of situations in which he is definitely viewed as an equal, as there's not like a man of the house around. You know, the car breaks down, it's up to Tommy to fix it and stuff like that. But at the same time, you also see the dichotomy because that character is such a kid. Like, one of the best things for me, and I mention this every time I talk about this fucking movie, but it's like one of the best things for me as a kid watching these movies for the first time, being about the age of Tommy, is that his reaction to so many things in this movie were what my reaction to these movies were. You know, it's like him reacting to the people fucking across in the cabin across the way and like getting all excited and crazy is like equivalent to me watching these movies as a kid, even though my parents didn't really care. So, you know, but it was just this idea that it was like you're seeing something you're not supposed to and how exciting it is. Even though obviously, like, don't peep on other people, kids. Like, that's a crime. That's a sex crime, all right? You'll get put on a list. You'll never get off the list. You'll have to tell people when you move to a neighborhood. Ask Frank about it. He knows. Frank, come on, man. Cut the shit. I don't know who Frank is. But I'm just assuming that there's one guy named Frank who's got a lot of shit going on who's watching this.
You're right.
There's always a chance. It's going on YouTube. It'll get to him eventually. Cut the shit, Frank. Anyway, the point is that, like, he feels like a kid, but he also clearly has a lot more responsibility. It's an interesting family dynamic that emotionally plays into what's happening really well, because you see how much they trust each other, and it means that, like, when they are put in jeopardy, it means that much more.
But also the kills. They were so fun and creative and cool. Since this was, like, technically second, but like first official Friday the 13th movie, like seeing the psychological play that Jason uses on people was really awesome. It was eerie and like really crazy.
You mean like him like nailing people to door frames and shit like that, where it's just like it's like, yeah, he's killing these people, but also like he's just like leaving little things around to fuck with people.
Yeah. Like, it's so wild. It's awesome.
And of course, after he dies and comes back, that just gets kicked up to another level.
Yeah.
And I would be remiss if I did not mention that one of the reasons the effects in this are so fantastic is because it is the first film in the franchise since the first one to bring back Tom Savini.
All those great splatter movies of the 80s where I was just going from just killing, I felt like an assassin going from one movie to the next, just wiping out teenagers. And I actually turned down Friday the 13th Part 2 because Jason was running around in Friday the 13th Part 2, and as you know, there is no Jason. Jason was a kid that died in the first movie. There's no Jason. There shouldn't be a Jason. That's what I was thinking. And they said, oh, no, we're going to change that. And then it comes out and there's Jason, you know, so. And he's still around. I cut his head in half in Part 4. We still have Jason running around.
And like, Savini is the guy who, like, brought us all of the Dawn of the Dead effects that we love so much, and Maniac, head explodings, like, fucking I can't jerk off Tom Savini enough. I've met him in person. He's a very blunt, forward, somewhat nice man, and he is an absolute legend. You know, From Dusk Till Dawn. We watched From Dusk Till Dawn at some point. Tom Savini's the guy with the pistol dick.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so anyway, Tom Savini, he did the effects for this. He's an absolute legend. His effects are very well put together. He knows how to hide them properly. He knows how to, like, what light they need to be cast in. And more importantly, during Vietnam, he was a medic. So, like, he saw, like, real horrific, horrible things happen to people. So when you look at his effects, there's a sense of reality to the effect that other movies of their time, even when they have great effects, they just don't feel as visceral.
Yeah.
And one of the things that works best about this movie is, like, well, yeah, there's definitely some kind of hokey horror movie stuff in the movie. Like, the visceralness of the kills and the visceralness of all of the effects are just, like, insane. Even, like, when Jason gets his hand chopped by the machete, and it's just, like, it looks surreal, but also, like, you can see the bone inside it as his hand is moving, and, like, see tendons move and stuff. It's insane. There's a reason why the action figure from that movie is displayed with the split hand, is because, like, it's just in the death of Jason, where he just falls on the fucking machete and slides the fuck down it, is just, it's beautiful.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. It's like, as a like, I love effects. I love gore effects, and I love them to be over the top, or I love them to be realistic. It just depends on your story, but the best you can do with an effect is get the effect that is the perfect tone to illustrate the emotion that you're wanting to have. And in that moment of, like, Jason sliding down the machete, we go from relief to shock to, like, disgust so fucking quickly that then it leaves us at an emotional place where whenever his finger twitches and Tommy smashes him the rest of the way, even though you don't see that, like, you're already in an emotional place where you react to it as if you had seen it. Like, Tom Savini knows exactly how to show you what you need to see and imply the rest. And even if what you're seeing is super graphic. Also, I think it's worth mentioning that the most graphic effect in the movie is Jason's death. No one gets it as bad as Jason gets it. So I think that's really fantastic. And yeah, the effects are fucking great. They just hold up really well, even on Blu-ray. And, you know, just to be fair, since, like, in this video and multiple other videos, I've sucked this movie's dick from here to Kingdom Come, it's not perfect, okay? It is a slasher movie. It's a low-budget movie. It's, you know, all those things. It definitely has some shortcomings, and it definitely makes some asks of you. Some are bigger than others, but for example, you really want me to fucking believe that kid made all of those elaborate puppet effects and shit in his room, and yet whenever he goes to fight, he does not come up with some elaborate Home Alone fucking shit? We should be watching fucking Home Alone Die Hard versus Jason by the end of this fucking movie. Like, that kid's gonna grow up to be Saw or some shit. It just doesn't make sense. It's too advanced for him. How about you?
The fact that, you know, they wanted us to believe that he was going to become a serial killer after this.
He is Jigsaw, I'm telling you, man!
Hello. I want to play a game.
I get what they're doing. The director put it in because he wanted this idea of, okay, well, like, Jason's dead now, but, like, you know, they're probably going to want to make a sequel because these things keep making money. And he's like, and my movie's fucking awesome, so it's, you know, people are gonna like it. So, like, yeah, put this thing in about maybe Tommy becoming the next killer, which gives your, like, franchise a potential second life. Try to do it with Halloween as well. It didn't fucking work with either of them. Famously, actually, the Hellraiser franchise was supposed to be about the female villain from the first movie, but Pinhead was so fucking iconic that even in the second movie, where they tried to kind of, like, do a handoff where she would take the reins, it just didn't work. Pinhead was already the icon, and he became the face of the franchise. It's like, yeah, Jason's mom's the original killer, but once he becomes the face of the franchise, that's who these movies are fucking about. No matter what you do, because in the next movie, they also try to set up Tommy at the end of that movie as, like, potentially being a fucking serial killer who's going to take up the mantle, even though we literally watched the 6th movie, and that's not what they do, you know? But, like, no. I mean, in the 5th movie, it's not Tommy, it's not Jason, it's fucking Roy.
Who the fuck is Roy?
Exactly! Roy's nobody. He's a paramedic who wears a fake bald cap and a Jason mask, and it's fucking Roy. And again, like, not perfect. Tommy is definitely a sex offender, you know, but like, let's move on. Like, the point is, for me personally, this takes all of the tropes as well as the best elements of the previous Friday movies and the potential of what that concept could yield, and kind of brings it to fruition, and then kills Jason off, which is great, because this solidifies who Jason is. When people think of Jason, I firmly believe they're thinking of Friday the 13th Part 4 Jason. Like, in terms of his mannerisms and the lore surrounding him, like, that mask that's established in the 3rd is solidified here, and that's Jason. But really, the icon that Jason would become, where, like, little kids know who Jason is and would wear his mask, wouldn't really come until Part 6. Which is a segue.
No one in Forest Green wants to be reminded of what that maniac did here. That's why we changed the name.
Just because our parents keep telling us that Jason was only a legend doesn't mean it wasn't true.
Jason belongs in hell, and I'm gonna see he gets there.
Flawless transition. Friday the 13th, Part 6. Jason lives. So, this movie was a little different than the last one. Still with Tommy Jarvis. This time he goes to mutilate Jason's corpse so that he can have closure, and ends up Frankenstein-style bringing him back. And this is a very tongue-in-cheek, self-aware entry in the franchise. This was the first time where, like, the movies had always contained a bit of humor to them. A lot of times it was character-driven or just because the situation was absurd. But in this one, humor is, like, the goal of most situations, with a few of them meaning to give you a little bit of a jump scare, and there are definitely heightened stakes, with this also being the first one of these movies where the kids are actually at the camp. And despite the fact that Jason, like 2 movies ago, had no problem killing a kid, like, with these, he doesn't seem all that interested. Like, he scares them, but, like, yeah, he doesn't seem that interested in killing them, which, like, would make more sense because he's only killing people because counselors let him drown when he was one of the kids. It's a whole thing. But you know what? This movie's not about making sense, because it fucking doesn't. It doesn't make sense. But it is a lot of fun, and that is what it's about. So, Taylor, after Part 4, what were you expecting? What did you have in mind? What did you think was going to be coming at you after that?
You know, definitely nothing like what what we watched. Yeah, I thought it would be a little more serious, and they would be able to, like, he was just gonna come back, you know, supernatural style.
Mm-hmm.
No, they just stuck a rod in him and then electrocuted his ass.
You didn't think you were going to be getting James Bond Alice slasher movie?
Yeah, no.
With, like, the opening credit sequence and everything? Yeah, this movie is definitely a curveball. But I think one of the reasons why I like the entries that I do in this franchise so much, and with so many of my favorite franchises like the Evil Dead franchise, the stronger movies are ones that have their own sense of identity, where, like, yes, they carry on, like, either themes or characters or tropes of the previous movies in the franchise, but each one has its own feel and is unique to itself. And this is the first one to be like, I don't know how to make Jason scary. But, like, what if Jason was like a Looney Tune whose joke was murdering people? But he's not funny, but what he does is really funny. And it kind of works. Like, the director brings this really nice sense of, like, the fun of the classic movie monsters from Universal Pictures, where, yeah, I mean, at the time, they probably scared the shit out of some people, but, like, look back at them now, it's like, they have lots of pathos, and they have lots of emotions, but more than anything, they're just kind of fun movies. And this really has that kind of fun, like you were saying, like, they just shove a rod in Jason and fucking bring him back to life. Overall, though, what did you think of this movie?
It was really cool. It was really fun and awesome, and a complete 180 from the fourth one. So yeah, it was refreshing.
It's definitely a nice little change of pace in our, like, triple feature.
Darren, we better turn around.
Why?
Because I've seen enough horror movies to know any weirdo wearing a mask is never friendly.
So once again, I can say you definitely enjoyed watching this movie. You definitely had fun with it. So what were some of the things that you enjoyed, or the things that surprised you about the movie?
There was a lot of stuff, but I think the most surprising thing is Tommy coming back.
Yeah.
And like how he's
why he's so sexy?
Yeah. Why he's viewed as a crazy person?
Well, I mean, okay, in fairness, we did skip the second installment in the Tommy Jarvis trilogy because it's Roy. Fucking Roy. Ruins everything. But, like, no, so yeah, it's well known that he, like, after the first one, he got sent to an insane asylum, and then he got sent to, like, this halfway house where everyone there was also killed. So, like, he's very well known in that area as being a nut job. So, like, to the movie's credit, yeah, like, that's a thing, and to your credit, like, you wouldn't get the full scope of that without having seen the last movie, but trust me, having not seen, if we had watched part 4 and part 5, you would have been done, and we wouldn't have got to part 6 or part 7. Just like most of the audiences when these movies were actually released. So yeah, that's fair, but, like, my question is more that just, like, he's supposed to be crazy, but, like, he looks pretty well put together. I mean, by modern day standards, he's definitely wearing too much denim, but that's true of a lot of characters in these movies. Denim Dan is like the damsel in distress for the next one, for fuck's sake. Like, that's my question. If he's that crazy, how'd he get so sexy? How'd he pull that shit off? I don't know, but it's magical.
He's like the male version of your crazy ex-girlfriend.
Absolutely. He's a little more compassionate. That bitch would have stabbed you. She did stab me. Tried to twice. That's on me, really, I guess. Anyway, one of the things that I really like about this movie that I think works really well is I do actually think that, like, they managed to do creative kills that are in keeping with, like, the spirit of the franchise, but also found a way to... Because the thing is, a great kill gag has the same structure as a great joke. You know, you have your setup, you have your delivery or your, like, complication, and then you have your punchline. And in this, they keep the same formula, they just focus more on a comedy end. A great example is, like, the chick that Court, Fuckboy Supreme, picks up and driving around in her stepdaddy's RV, and, like, when Jason kills her, he just smashes her head in, and on the outside you see it take the shape of her head. Like, that's something from a fucking Looney Tunes cartoon, but they've also established how physically strong Jason is, so you don't question it, and it's not what you were expecting, so you get the same kind of surprise that you would out of a great kill. But it's also absurd, so, like, it just works on every level, and so much of this movie is like that, you know? Like, he bends the sheriff back over, which is, like, horrifying, but the moment you go, oh my god, then you have to laugh at how absurd the basic idea is. Like, you feel both of them, and the movie really pairs those things. It knows how to do those jokes that are like, yes, you're gonna feel the pain of it for just a second, and that's why it's funny. The comedy is just played really, really well. I love that there are moments, very brief moments, that it's, like, hard to tell because of the costume, but there are moments where, like, Jason is almost, like, taken aback by the new way he's able to handle things.
Yeah.
Like, dude with the machete, and he grabs the guy and jerks him around like this, and the dude flies against a tree, and he's just holding the guy's arm, and he just holds it up like, well, that's new. Yeah, the comedy of the movie is just extremely well balanced. It would have been really easy to do this as a silly movie that wasn't respectful to the source material, because, again, the source material being not of the highest quality all the time, it'd be really easy to do that and turn it into the joke. but Jason's never the joke, and the franchise is never the joke. It's just absurd enough and self-aware enough to know how to play it.
Yeah. Another thing I liked about this whole movie is the cop slash dad.
Yeah, the sheriff.
Yeah, there was one scene that I really, really liked for some reason, where he goes to check on the other the two girl counselors, and all he sees is blood everywhere. Like, an obscene amount of blood, too. Like, it was crazy. And he immediately goes and checks on the kid. I liked that because it was like, oh, this movie's trying to protect the kids.
Yeah.
And, like, it's a very real thing that a dad would definitely do.
And not only that, it plays into that character. This movie definitely does, even though some of the characters are kind of like not overly developed, like it does, the characters that it chooses to develop, it does understand them really well. And yeah, like I remember the sheriff character when I was a kid being really easy to be like, he's a dick. But then, like, as you get older and you're actually thinking about, like, the position he's in and, like, trying to take care of his community and what Tommy Jarvis represents, it's, like, up into the... And also, like, at that point, they've already had at least one copycat killer, which Tommy Jarvis was involved with that whole case, too. So even if he doesn't believe Jason is back to life, like, he has reason to not trust Tommy and has reason to do almost everything he does in this movie. Him going to protect the kids is absolutely in keeping with his character up until this point. Because whether it's Tommy or Jason or a copycat, like, that's his job and that is what he's trying to do, even if he is overly emotional at times, and it makes it seem like maybe his methods are a little bit unjust. But at the same time, as an adult watching this, I'm like, I know all the things now. And it's like, he responds, pretty accurately. Even in terms of, like, a father who doesn't want his daughter around that dude, it's like, sure, does he overreact? Probably a little bit. He locks him up in jail. But it's also an understandable reaction. And if I were that father, I probably would do worse. So, Yeah, the dad character is really good. And again, like, while the comedy is good, again, it has these characters like the sheriff, or for that matter, like Tommy, and even Meg, who are pretty relatively grounded, and like, while some of the things they're doing are absurd and the situation is absurd, those actors are always treating it like it's real and like it's important what's happening. And because of that, it gives you an anchor throughout the movie where, like, the comedy can be the comedy. You can have the goofy fucking paintball guys out there doing their thing with Home Dude with, like, fucking Woody Allen glasses tripping over his own feet. You can do that because you have these other characters that, like, when it needs to matter, it can matter. And just, like, one other thing, again, okay, so, like, I love the fact that there are kids. I mentioned that already. Like, the kids being at the camp definitely raises the stakes. Even if it feels like to us as an audience, Jason isn't really going to hurt those kids, it still means there's more at stake. So definitely adds to the tension. But also, like, amongst the kids, there are several kids who get, like, spotlight moments, and even, like, there's two kids who get an arc throughout the fucking movie where they get, like, several scenes. First, they're out with fuckboy Court, and they're just like, he's showing them the thing about the rocks, and they're just not having his bullshit. And then, like, by the end of it, they're having to hide under the bed, which, by the way, I love that whenever freaking Meg comes in, she's like, everybody hide under your beds. We just have shots of them, like, diving under their beds like they're little ninjas or something, and like grabbing their shoes and stuff. It's like a Ninja Turtles, like, Ninja Vanish moment. It's so stylized, like the rest of this movie, which is another great aspect of this movie, is the stylization of it. But, like, the kids being there just adds so much to it, and these two kids just being there, and one of them being like, oh, we're dead meat, and then in the next scene, it's like, we're so dead meat. And at the time, his friend, who had just asked, do you think we're going to be okay? Now he's just resigned himself to his fate, and he's just...
So, what were you going to be when you grew up?
And his friend just looks at him like, what the fuck?
Real dead meat.
Again, it's just one of those things where it's like, they have a few scenes, like, specifically with those two kids. Actually, I think both them and the little girl each get, like, 3 scenes. Like, it's really well structured. The jokes go in the right place where you need a cut in the tension, and it wouldn't feel right to insert that comedy into the main story with Jason and the adults outside. So, like, the kids adds extra tension. It's just a really good functioning device within there that, like, pays dividends, and it's the first time in 6 movies we see fucking campers at the camp. That's nuts. So yeah, all in all, this movie does like a lot of crazy good things. But as always, there's some downside. Yeah, specifically in terms of things that don't work out 100% in this movie are things like The Man Behind the Fucking Mask by Alice Cooper. Holy fuckballs, that song sucks. The movie's very careful not to ever make Jason seem like a joke. But that song is not. Holy fuck, and the video is so awful too. You saw the video.
Yeah.
Like, Jason comes out of the screen looking all frumpy because it's Alice Cooper under there! Woo! The song's really bad, but in terms of the actual movie itself, there are some scenes in the movie that were clearly added after the fact, such as the young couple in the woods. They get murked, and it's boring. It's boring. Jason breaking the glass is fun if in your head you imagine him doing some kind of a one-liner about littering. I do every time I watch the movie, so I enjoy it, but there's not a lot there. This is a pretty good audience participation. I'll give it that. What about you, Taylor? Was there anything in the movie that didn't work for you?
I think just a few characters that I personally didn't like that weird cop that was working with.
Oh, the deputy?
Yeah.
Just the overzealous fucking laser pointer.
Yeah,
fucking...
why do you gotta? Why?
The laser scope is weird too, because I know laser scopes were a thing at this time. I am almost positive that there was a laser scope at this time that did not look like a fucking Pringles can that was grip taped onto the top of a gun. You could maybe be like, well, he's just a small town cop. He's overzealous because anytime anything happens, I don't know. But yeah, the cop's a dipshit. That's the point. The point is that that cop is a dipshit. Yeah, he's not great. We don't really know who he is. He might be a great guy when no one else is around, but we only see him on his worst day. So, yeah. Happy Friday the 13th.
Bitch, what the fuck?
Yeah, that's his most memorable line. We sure picked a hell of a day to do this. What do you mean? Happy Friday the 13th. The sheriff doesn't know what fucking day of the week it is when he lives in fucking Camp Blood Central. Get fucked. As I did say, there's a lot of stuff in this movie that doesn't make sense. But, again, luckily, the drive of this movie is not to be a logical and concise film. It's to be a fun, entertaining romp with a bit of gore and a lot of silliness. And on that, it, succeeds fully. It is maybe the most entertaining out of the original Friday the 13th franchise, just in terms of pure fun factor. And it's one that definitely deserves a watch, and that is why it was included in Taylor's education on Friday the 13th.
Oh my gosh, look at that. It's the next film.
Holy fuck, Kane Hodder!
Jason is back. But this time, someone is waiting. Friday the 13th, Part 7, The New Blood.
There goes the neighborhood.
That's right, guys. We are on to Friday the 13th, Part 7, The New Blood. Which is Tina versus Jason. Where we finally have a character who has the potential to put up a real fight against Jason, and he's not happy about it. But then, on the other side, we have all the same shit from every other Friday the 13th movie. Taylor, so, you saw the epitome of a Friday the 13th movie, and then you saw the iconization of a Friday the 13th movie. What do you think about this Friday the 13th movie?
It's different to the other two again.
Yeah.
Which is wild.
While having so many of the exact same things in it.
Yeah.
It's totally different.
Yeah. And it doesn't feel like it's about Jason. It feels like Jason happens to happen, you know, by accident.
Right. In this one, Tina accidentally resurrects Jason with her telepathic powers because she mistakes him for her father.
Yeah.
Which, turns out they're both violent, abusive monsters. So, I guess you could maybe make that mistake.
Yeah.
But overall, You enjoy this one?
Oh yeah, definitely. It was very fun still, and the characters seem like real people again.
Some of them, yeah.
Yeah. There's quite a few that I'm just like, I want to strangle you?
Yeah. By design, this movie was intended to be very effects heavy, but this was also during a period where the MPAA was just like hacking horror movies to pieces, ironically enough. And so a lot of that stuff gets left on the cutting room floor, which is really unfortunate because a lot of the other stuff that's on screen is very typical of Friday the 13th, and I would say is not done to the best of what those aspects are in a lot of cases. I still love this movie. Unabashedly, it is my second favorite Friday the 13th movie after Friday the 13th Part 4, and that is mostly for the third act of the fucking movie, which is just absolutely baller. And I think because they had to lose a lot of footage, we get a lot of like the gore. We get a lot more of just like people randomly walking around calling out for people. But we'll get to that stuff here in a minute. So, you enjoyed the movie. It's definitely different. It's definitely interesting. What were some things about this one that either surprised you or really stood out as a positive to you?
It was the new character, brand new, girl added into this.
Not just like a new character, but a new type of character.
Yeah, like a completely new type of character. You had originally said before we started, like, she has superhuman abilities. I thought that it was like, oh yeah, she can like punch really hard or something,
Yeah.
I didn't think that she had like mind powers that was like manipulating things. I was like, oh shit, okay, alright.
Yeah, historically, like, this was supposed to be Jason versus Carrie, and Stephen King just wouldn't sign off on it. So they kind of went off and did their own thing. And I think that the movie's better for it for the most part. Again, I do wish that was more of the focus, but again, as we mentioned, all that stuff. It's nice that they decided to change it up in a different way. Like, in some ways, they went back to basics.
Yeah.
And in other ways, they're like, yeah, but if we're going to go back to basics, let's at least do this new thing over here. And the character of Tina is really interesting. Like, yes, she is an emotional mess, but she is still a strong character who, like, fights through her pain and trauma in order to, like, basically harness that pain and trauma as a weapon to survive. So, like, that's really badass and cool. I love that they give her a damsel in distress of her own in, Denim Dan. He lives, but yeah, this is also, like, where the love interest of the final girl kind of, like, they kind of cement in stone that in the Friday movies, a lot of times that character gets to live. But moreover than anything, the major improvement to this movie, outside of creating an adversary worthy of Jason, is Kane motherfucking Hodder as Jason. In terms of Jason specifically, what were some of the things that you noticed that were different this time around?
He was like real zombie.
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah.
Like, oh my gosh, it was so gory and so like ugly and amazing, and it was so good. Also, the way he killed. Again, awesome, but like way more violent. Like, by this point, he now knows, I'm like 20 times better than I was.
Right.
I could do better things.
Kane Hodder brings a lot to the role. Like, Giancarlo Beekler, the director of this, started off in special effects, so it was his idea to take Jason and just cover him in every, like, wound and cut and bullet that Jason had ever fucking received anywhere in the franchise, and just put it all on him and be like, okay. And then he's also been rotting underground for a while, so, like, bones are hanging out, and then, like, him being under the water. Yeah, he looked fucking phenomenal. And then you put all that onto Kane Hodder, who is just this behemoth of a man who plays Jason like a mix between, like, a fucking great white shark and a junkyard dog. The way he hunts is very methodical and mechanical, and like, Jason's always been a character who could kill you with his bare hands, like crush your skull or something. But something about the way Kane Hodder does it, he knows how to fucking sell it, where, like, before, actors who did it would just grab and you'd see pressing, but with Kane Hodder, when he presses, like, his entire hands tremble and like you can see the veins pop in his arms as he's doing it through the makeup and shit. Like he really sells the power and precision behind this character. Where I feel like other Jasons would have taken 5 moves to do something, Kane Hodder takes 2 moves to do the same thing. And at the same time, while he is this like constant, there's always like the way he always feels like he's breathing, which gives you that like junkyard dog that's on the end of its leash, just like about to fucking go off the chain on you. Just so much about Kane's performance added to the things that we already know and love about Jason, like his proclivity for windows. We discovered in this watcher that the true victims of these movies are actually windows. It's not any of the human characters. These R.I.P. Windows. Bill Gates sends his regards. Jason in this movie, despite the fact that the kills are so cut down, Jason in this movie is like ideal peak Jason. He looks the best. He has the best performer doing it. Unfortunately, in the very next movie, the costume's not as good, despite Kane Hodder being awesome. So, like, this is, for me, the ultimate motherfucking Jason. Like, Jason embodied. Zombie Jason, that is. Volume 2, or whatever you want to call it. Jason's a definite improvement in this film.
And then also, like, Denim Dan, not a fuckboy.
Yeah, no.
Most of the guys in these movies are, like, fuckboys, and, like, you just want to be like, dude, come on, man. But he's actually a genuinely good person. He, like, cares about the main character, you know, the main girl character and everything, and, yeah, like, he's awesome.
Yeah, Denim Dan's he's a pretty solid dude. He keeps wanting to get everybody together so they can all get out of there together. And these aren't even his fucking friends. These are his goddamn cousin's friends. Like, if that were me, sorry guys, but if that were me, if you're my cousin's friend, I'm sorry. I'm gone. I'm fucking gone. But this dude's just like, let's get everybody together, eh? Denim Dan is a good guy. Yeah. He's a damsel in distress, maybe. He gets a gun and he gets to shoot it and doesn't do anything.
Doesn't do shit.
And then he has to wait on his new girlfriend's daddy to show up and save the day. But deep down, he's a good guy. You're a good Chad, Denim Dan. So yeah, this movie definitely has a lot of improvements in a lot of places. There's a lot of really cool things, and the movie definitely could have been cooler than it is if people had just got out of the thing's fucking way. But having said that, the movie that it is also pretty flawed. As I said, you know, the gore is cut down extremely. There's a lot of tropey stuff. Taylor, what was something in this movie that didn't work for you?
At the very end of the movie, they're, like, on the lake, you know? And all of a sudden, like, I understand it's her powers, but all of a sudden, the dad just dives through. And I was like, what? They didn't get his body out of the lake? For one, and two, why?
Yeah, it does beg a lot of questions. Like, what the fuck actually? Like, so I guess she was sensing her dad down there, but maybe Jason, Jason was easier to wake up? I don't know. Is there stuff like an alarm for dead people? Is it just whoever hears it will wake up? It's a valid point where, like, okay, yeah, I mean, what's crazy about it is we're talking about a movie about a serial killer that's been killed and is now brought back from the dead by a girl with telekinetic powers. But it is still weird and shocking and off-putting at the end of it when her dad jumps out of the lake to grab Jason and save the day.
And he has almost no decomposition when you see him either.
It's very little, but you know, most of Jason's damage was from previous movies.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of water damage on him other than maybe like his clothes and stuff. You know, little things here and there. But like, yeah, I mean, they also want you to be able to recognize him because it might be even weirder if you just thought it was a random zombie, like one of Jason's other victims, or like the guy's wearing a sweater. If they didn't make it really clear, people might have thought it was Mrs. Voorhees jumping out of the water. again, this movie's continuity is all kinds of fucked, and like all kinds of weird shit goes on, which is why I don't get why people freak out whenever they introduce the Necronomicon and Jason goes to hell as like the explanation to how like Jason came back and all this shit. Because, you know, none of it makes sense. It's all over the place. But as a little kid, I was like, holy fuck, that makes sense. But I think the bigger problem with Dad coming out at the end, on top of the fact that it's confusing and weird, and like, yeah, I guess technically they set up she can do that because she brought Jason back, but it feels out of left field because, like, she's the main character, and she has telekinetic powers. And she calls her daddy to save her, who again, like, is established as being an abusive dickhead. So, like, okay, you called a monster to slay a monster, I get that thematically, but wouldn't it be more of a triumph for her, the girl with telekinetic powers, to fucking explode Jason with her powers at the end? How are you going to do a movie about a girl with telekinetic powers who's fighting Jason and not have her just explode him? How the fuck are you going to bring him back for the sequel? It doesn't matter. That's the problem with the people who are making that fucking movie. Let them worry about it then. Electricity can bring him back. Girls with psychic powers can bring him back. In the previous movies, he gets all kinds of shit shoved into his body and he just keeps coming back. They'll figure it out. Jesus Christ. What a letdown. That is probably the biggest flaw of the movie. You hit it on the head right there, is just that Jason doesn't explode. I know that wasn't your original point, but you hinted at the underlying issue there.
Yeah.
Fuck. Now all my others feel kind of...
petty.
Yeah, but we're going to go through them anyway. Fuck it.
All right.
Doing it anyway. And I know that you kind of like them, and again, but I really think that a lot of the characters in this movie are some of the worst examples from this franchise. The ones who are developed, they're really good. The mom, the doctor, Denim Dan to a smaller extent. He has about as much to do as the girl in most movies. So, like, I'm fine with it. Fuck it, I don't care. He's pretty. That's his main job, is to be pretty and to take up space next to her. Like, he does his job fine, but, like, a lot of the characters, like, the bitchy girl character, she's fun, but she's very, very one-dimensional. Like, the writer guy, it feels like maybe it's a joke that the writer is doing on some other writer he knows, but it also just feels like they're ripping off Marty McFly's dad from Back to the Future to a certain extent with that.
Rejection. Okay. Fine. I can take it. I've been rejected by some of the finest science fiction magazines in the continental United States.
But the characters just don't feel very well developed, and in the scenes where we're getting to their kills, there's nothing going on. Like in other movies, as we're getting to those moments up to their kills, like a lot of times there's character stuff going on. But in this, it really is just multiple scenes of people just walking out into like some area and calling someone's name for 2.5 minutes until we get to like a 30-second setup for a kill that like has been cut by the MPA down to like 2 seconds. This time watching it actually was one of the first times where I really felt the drag of those scenes, like watching it with someone else and like really paying attention to it. Like, man, like the nerdy girl who's just here to be a nerdy girl and like she never gets laid and she's like, there's nothing deeper to her other than like she thinks she doesn't have to be a nerdy girl because she's pretty. By the way, she's way hotter before she puts all that shit on. There's nothing to her journey, and then it's just her wandering through the woods for 3 minutes and getting killed off screen essentially. And it's like, that kind of sucks. You know, if it wasn't for how awesome the third act of this movie is, and for like all the good things about the movie all going into that, I feel like this movie not only would be far less loved by me, but I think it would be thought of a lot less highly by the fan base in general, because a lot of the stuff that we have here is not particularly interesting. It's stuff we've seen time and time again. And there's, you know, I mean, I guess they tried to put enough nudity in it to break it up, you know, and, you know, make it interesting. But that definitely could have worked when the movie came out. But in the modern day of, you know, internet porn, it's like boobies will only get you so far. Let's just leave it at the movie definitely has a lot of flaws. Like so many of the movies that I love, it is a highly flawed movie, but highly entertaining. And the things that it excels at in leaps and bounds. Not to mention, it gave us the all-time greatest Jason of all time, Kane motherfucking Hodder. And he is just glorious, oozing with pus and sexuality. Yeah, that's right. Those two things go together now, thanks to Kane fucking Hodder. Right on, guys. So there you have it. Friday the 13th, Part 4. Part 6 and Part 7. Viewed by Taylor for the first time. Of course, at some other point on the channel, I will be digging into some of these movies a little bit more deeply. I've already covered Parts 4 and Part 7 here on the channel before in the What You Mean You Ain't Seen show. You can go and find those for yourself. But let's see what we really came here for. Taylor, person who now has seen 3 Friday the 13th movies and a Jason movie. How would you personally rank these 3?
I would definitely rank them like in order from how I
in the order we watched them?
Yeah,
Okay.
like honest, I don't know why, but like I just liked it in that
Yeah.
order. It was just they were great in that order. Yeah.
Okay, I mean that's definitely fair. I do have to say that for me, normally Part 7 ranks above Part 6, but that's just for Kane Hodder and the perfect Jason. Like, as I was watching through them this time, I have to admit, I definitely had more fun watching Part 6. But I also think that, like, a lot of the fun of Part 6 isn't fun unless you have a frame of reference for it, which is why, again, I was like, at one point, we were going to just watch Part 6, when I was like, well, that's a good one just to show her, and I knew you'd like it. But I was like, yeah, but, like, without really having a grasp on what Friday the 13th is, a lot of the jokes in Part 6 are kind of meaningless. Do you think us viewing them in that order affected you liking them in that order?
Probably, yeah.
Probably to some degree?
Probably, yeah. Because, like, for example, my favorite Lord of the Rings movie is the second one, and that's the one that I first watched.
Okay.
So,
yeah, I mean, that's fair. I feel like at least the first 2 on this list are solid movies, and Part 7 is fantastically awesome. You know, as a film, it's definitely the weaker of the link. So even though for me, if I'm doing a favorites list, it goes ahead of Part 6. But if I'm being honest and talking about quality of film, yeah, 6 probably goes above it. But either way, I now at least feel like I've done my duty to both Jason and to you as your friend. You know, you now understand unequivocally who Jason is and have a good basis and example of some fun, entertaining movies that he's in. So the next time you're standing around and someone says, I hate Jason, those movies are trash, you can be, bullshit! Let me tell you about Part 6. Right on, children of the screen. Thank you guys very much. That was our Friday the 13th video for this year. Got to have 2 of them this year, and I'm really glad that I got to have a guest for it. This was a lot of fun, and we wrapped it up a little bit easier. I expected a little bit more pushback on like the status of these and whether they were good or not, but, you know, hell, I've got great taste is what this means. So once again, children of the screen, thank you guys very much for watching. I hope y'all have a good one.
bye!
Nerd scum. Ow.